Imagine holding a piece of copper alloy in the palm of your hand that is worth more than a luxury sports car, a sprawling suburban home, or a lifetime of comfortable savings. For decades, coin collectors, metal detectorists, and everyday citizens across the United Kingdom and around the globe have shared a collective obsession with an object that sounds completely ordinary on the surface, a British one-penny coin. But this is no ordinary pocket change. This is the legendary 1933 British penny, a coin so shrouded in mystery, history, and financial allure that it has become the ultimate holy grail of modern numismatics. If you have ever heard a rumor that a single penny could change your life overnight, this is the exact coin responsible for that myth. To truly understand why a simple penny from 1933 commands such a staggering premium in the global auction market today, we have to look back at the humble anatomy of the British pre-decimal penny. In the early 20th century, the British penny was a massive, heavy coin compared to the small cents or decimal pennies we use today. It measured a substantial 31 millimeters in diameter and weighed precisely 9.4 grams. Struck from a durable bronze alloy consisting mostly of copper, with small percentages of tin and zinc, these coins were built to withstand the rigors of heavy daily commerce. On the obverse side, they bore the left-facing profile of King George V, accompanied by a formal Latin inscription detailing his titles as King of all the Britons and Emperor of India. On the reverse side sat the iconic image of Britannia, the personification of British maritime power, seated on a rock, holding her trident and resting her hand on a shield adorned with the Union Jack. Underneath her feet, in the exergue at the very bottom of the coin, was the space reserved for the date. 400s of millions of coins minted during this era. That date read 1912, 1920, or 1936. But in 1933, everything changed, or rather, everything stopped. The story of the 1933 penny is inextricably linked to the grim economic realities of the Great Depression. By the early 1930s, the global economy had collapsed, and consumer spending across the United Kingdom plummeted to historic lows. Because people were buying fewer goods, the velocity of money slowed down dramatically. Pennies, which were used for small, everyday transactions like buying a newspaper, paying for a tram ride, or purchasing a loaf of bread, began piling up unused in commercial banks and post offices across the country. The Royal Mint had already produced massive quantities of pennies in the preceding years, including over 50 million coins in 1928, 49 million in 1929, and another 53 million in 1932. With hundreds of millions of bronze pennies already congesting the banking system, the authorities realized they had an enormous surplus. There was absolutely no operational need to strike new pennies for general circulation in 1933. The decision was made internally at the Royal Mint to halt production of the denomination for the year. However, an ancient and unique British tradition prevented the 1933 penny from being completely wiped from history. During the era, it was a customary practice for complete sets of current year coins to be placed inside specialized caskets and buried beneath the foundation stones of major new public buildings, churches, and institutions erected during that calendar year. This was done as a historical time capsule, a symbolic gesture to anchor the building to the precise moment of its creation. In 1933, several high-profile construction projects were underway, and the architects and officials requested official coin sets from the Royal Mint to fulfill this ceremonial obligation. Because the Mint could not provide a set of 1933 coins without including the prominent penny, they were forced to set up the coin presses and strike an incredibly minuscule batch of pennies bearing the 1933 date. No official public records were kept regarding the exact number of pennies produced during this emergency run, but historians and numismatic experts agree that the total number of currency standard 1933 pennies ever minted was likely no more than 6 or 7 pieces. Because so few were made, a literal roll call exists for these ultra-rare coins, mapping out their journeys through history. 3 of these pennies were explicitly produced to be buried beneath foundation stones. One was placed under the foundation stone of the Church of St. Cross in Middleton, near Leeds. A second was placed under St. Mary's Church in Hawksworth Wood, also in Leeds. The third was buried deep beneath the foundation of the massive Senate House building at the University of London. To ensure that a historical record of the coin existed outside of building foundations, the Royal Mint also produced a few additional copies to be kept as reference specimens in institutional archives. Today, one of those coins resides safely in the British Museum, another is held in the official collection of the Royal Mint Museum, and a third found its way into the archives of the BBC's Broadcasting House. This left only a tiny handful of specimens available to eventually transition into private hands, sparking an intense, century-long treasure hunt. The buried coins were meant to rest undisturbed for centuries, but human greed intervened in a dramatic way. In August of 1970, daring thieves targeted the Church of St. Cross in Leeds. Knowing the legendary value of the coin resting beneath the church's foundation, the criminals managed to break into the property, excavate the area surrounding the historic cornerstone, and successfully steal the 1933 penny along with the rest of the coin set. The theft sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and the Church of England. Fearing that the sister church, St. Mary's in Hawksworth Wood, would become the next target for ruthless criminals, the Bishop of Leeds authorised the emergency removal of their own buried 1933 penny for security reasons. That coin was subsequently sold at auction to a private collector, officially entering the open market and adding fuel to the fire of the coin's mythological status. The stolen coin from the Church of St. Cross has never been recovered, leaving its whereabouts one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the history of coin collecting. When discussing this legendary coin, collectors frequently ask about the presence of a mint mark. In the broader world of coin collecting, mint marks are tiny letters stamped onto a coin surface to identify the specific facility where it was manufactured. For the vast majority of British pre-decimal pennies, there are no mint marks because they were struck at the main Royal Mint facility in London. However, during periods of extreme demand in the early 20th century, the Royal Mint contracted private operations to help strike pennies. This gave rise to the famous H mint mark, representing the Heaton Mint in Birmingham, and the KN mint mark, representing the King's Norton Metal Company. Pennies from 1912, 1918, and 1919 can sometimes be found with these tiny letters nestled next to the date or Britannia shield, and they carry their own premium due to low mintages. However, when it comes to an authentic, currency standard 1933 British penny, there is absolutely no mint mark. Because these rare specimens were struck exclusively at the primary Royal Mint facility in London, the space around the date is entirely clean. If you encounter a coin that someone claims is a 1933 penny with an H or a KN mint mark, you are looking at a logical impossibility for a British issue, or more likely, a case of mistaken identity. Many people over the years have found a 1933 penny in their old family collections, got incredibly excited, only to realise upon closer inspection that the coin was actually an Australian penny, a New Zealand coin, or an issue from Jersey or British West Africa. These nations also used the pre-decimal system and frequently minted pennies in 1933 with various mint marks or identifiers, but because they were minted in the millions, they are only worth a few dollars at best. The magic and the massive financial value belong strictly and exclusively to the United Kingdom penny with no mint mark. While the standard currency versions have no mint marks, the year 1933 did produce another hyper-rare variant known to numismatists as the André Lavrelier pattern penny. During the early 1930s, the Royal Mint was plagued by a technical issue known as ghosting. Because the metal of the penny was thin and the relief of the king's portrait on the obverse was deep, the high pressure of the coin press often caused an unsightly shadow or outline of the portrait to bleed through onto the reverse side, faintly appearing behind the image of Britannia. To solve this aesthetic problem, the Mint hired a highly celebrated French artist and medalist named André Lavrelier to create an experimental, modified design. Lavrelier sculpted a beautifully crisp, alternative portrait of King George V with a slightly different neck structure and hair detail, designed to distribute the metal flow more evenly during striking. The Royal Mint struck exactly 4 of these experimental Lavrelier pattern pennies in 1933 to test the dies. They were never intended for circulation and were treated as strictly internal prototypes. One was retained by the Royal Mint Museum, while the other 3 eventually slipped into private collections. Because these are experimental patterns, they feature distinct artistic nuances that experts can spot instantly under microscope, and their survival rate is even lower than the standard currency version. When a Lavrelier pattern crosses the auction block, it creates a global media feeding frenzy, pulling in offers from billionaire collectors across multiple continents. Given that only a single-digit number of genuine 1933 British pennies exist in the entire world, the market is completely flooded with deceptive counterfeits and altered dates. Criminals have known for generations that altering a common, low-value penny into a simulated 1933 penny can yield a massive fraudulent payout. The most common method of forgery involves taking a genuine British penny from 1932 or 1934, years where pennies were minted by the millions, and carefully carving or modifying the final digit of the date under a high-powered engraving tool. A skilled counterfeiter can slice off the tail of a 2 or the top of a 4 and use specialized microscopic soldering or brazing techniques to attach a fabricated 3 in its place. To the naked eye, especially on a coin that has some natural wear and tear, these alterations can look remarkably convincing. Another deceptive method utilizes casting sprues or complete electrotype replications, where a copy of a genuine coin is made in two separate halves and fused together. To protect yourself from these highly dangerous fakes, professional numismatists look for specific telltale signs. First, an authentic coin must match the precise weight of 9.4 grams and a diameter of 31 millimeters. Many fakes lose weight during the grinding and altering process. Second, under intense magnification, an altered date will show microscopic scratches, tool marks, or disruptions in the natural patina and flow lines of the bronze metal surrounding the final digit. On a genuine coin, the metal around the numbers flows smoothly because it was stamped simultaneously under immense pressure. On a fake, you will often see a tiny seam or a slight discoloration where the new digit was chemically bonded or soldered to the surface. Now, let us tackle the fascinating scenario presented by a 1933 British penny found in a circulated, fine condition, and translate what that looks like in today's red-hot global auction market, specifically in US dollars. In coin grading, fine condition means a coin has seen substantial use in daily commerce. The high points of King George's hair and the intricate details of Britannia's shield and robes would be worn down and flattened, but the major design elements, the inscriptions, and most importantly, the legendary 1933 date would still be perfectly clear and legible. Virtually all known authentic 1933 pennies are in mint state or pristine proof condition because they were either preserved in museums or safely tucked inside protective building caskets from the day they were born. But what if one of the missing coins, perhaps the stolen piece from the Church of St. Cross, actually spent years circulating heavily in the public sector before being pulled from an old jar or discovered with a metal detector? What if a handled, worn, circulated fine specimen emerged today? In the current numismatic landscape, condition is usually king, but when an item reaches the level of absolute world-class rarity like the 1933 penny, the survival of the coin itself completely supersedes its physical grade. If a genuine, authenticated 1933 UK penny in circulated fine condition were to surface at a major international auction house like Heritage Auctions or Baldwin's today, its value would be astronomical. To establish a baseline, we can look at the historical sales of the ultra-high-grade specimens. A pristine mint state regular strike example of the 1933 penny shattered records when it was sold by Heritage Auctions for a jaw-dropping $240,000. Other high-grade proof examples routinely fetch anywhere from $76,000 to well over $100,000 depending on the specific auction environment and the intensity of the bidding war. If a circulated fine specimen came to market, it would represent a completely unique opportunity. It would be the only known circulated example of the rarest modern British coin, making it accessible to collectors who want the history but cannot compete for the museum-grade pieces. Because of this intense psychological demand, experts estimate that a genuine 1933 penny in circulated fine condition would easily command between $100,000 and $150,000 in today's auction market. The sheer historical gravity of the coin ensures that even with wear, scratches, and a faded luster, its value remains safely in the six-figure territory. It is a financial phenomenon where scarcity completely breaks the traditional rules of coin grading. For content creators, metal detectorists, and history buffs, the story of the 1933 penny serves as a thrilling reminder that hidden fortunes are still waiting to be discovered in the most unexpected places. It forces us to look closer at the old objects we take for granted. The next time you find yourself sorting through an old collection of family heirlooms, exploring a estate sale, or sifting through a jar of unsorted vintage world coins, look closely at those large, heavy British bronze pennies. Check the obverse for the portrait of King George V, turn it over to see Britannia holding her trident, and slide your eyes down to the very bottom of the coin. If the digits clearly and cleanly read 1933, and if the coin passes the strict weight, measurement, and authentication tests of a professional grading service, you're not just holding a piece of copper alloy. You are holding a legendary artifact born from the Great Depression, preserved by an ancient building tradition, and worth a life-changing fortune in the modern global market.